To domestic manufacturing facilities. He also says moving forward, new medications will be sold at the reduced most favored nation cost. So early CDC data shows that this season's flu vaccine may cut the risk of doctor visits and hospitalizations by about 50%. The data was collected in the southern hemisphere, where flu activity usually starts earlier than here in the U.S. We've got our ABC News medical correspondent, Dr. Darian Sutton, who is here with us for more in our segment, The Checkup. So, Dr. Sutton, what does this data mean for the upcoming cold and flu season here in the U.S.?
Selena, this data helps us to understand and predict what we might be up against. If you look into the most recent evidence from the CDC morbidity and mortality report, something that really stands out that I think is so important to understand. Last year, we saw at least 280 deaths of children secondary to influenza, and more than 40% of these cases had no underlying conditions. And then when we look at the evidence of the flu shots, and the reason why we look at the southern hemisphere is because that's kind of our seasonal opposite. It helps us to predict our future, not only what we might be up against, but how effective those shots might be. It seems as though it's effective in terms of 50%, reducing your risk of a doctor's visit, and most importantly, reducing your risk of a hospitalization. You can look at a flu shot with the similar protectiveness as we put on our seatbelt. That also reduces your risk about 40 to 60% of a severe accident or a severe injury secondary to a car accident. So think of it as buckling up for the winter season.
Okay, buckling up for the winter season, and help us just understand this data. So the estimates from this CDC report are similar to vaccine effectiveness in the northern hemisphere from last buckling up for the winter season.
It's about 40 to 60% visit. Opposite, it helps us to predict these cases. Underlying conditions. And then when we look at the evidence of the flu shots, and the reason why we look at the southern hemisphere is because that's kind of our seasonal opposite. It helps us to predict our future, not only what we might be up against, but how effective those shots might be. It seems as though it's effective in terms of 50%, reducing your risk of a doctor's visit, and most importantly, reducing your risk of a hospitalization. You can look at a flu shot with the similar protectiveness as we put on our seatbelt. That also reduces your risk about 40 to 60% of a severe accident or a severe injury secondary to a car accident. So think of it as buckling up for the winter season.
Okay, buckling up for the winter season, and help us just understand this data. So the estimates from this CDC report are similar to vaccine effectiveness in the northern hemisphere from last season's flu shot. But the CDC also just issued a report that shows flu hospitalizations hit a record high last season. So help us understand this.
Yes, that's right. Aside from children being harmed, we saw nearly 40,000 hospitalizations associated with influenza. It reminds us that the flu is so much more than just a fever or something that keeps you in the bed. There are complications that we have to be mindful of. For example, at least 100 cases of pediatric encephalopathy. Selena, this is inflammation of the brain that can leave detrimental, harmful, and permanent effects on the child. We also understand that nearly 90% of those who were hospitalized were not fully vaccinated. It reminds us of what the point of the flu vaccine is. It's not perfect, but it will prevent you from going to the hospital.
And Dr. Sutton, just remind us, who is eligible for the flu shot and what kind of vaccines are available?
Great question. The CDC recommends that anyone over the age of 6 months gets a flu vaccine. Important to remember that there are high-risk groups that we have to be mindful of, those over the age of 65, pregnant mothers and postpartum mothers, as well as those who have an underlying chronic disease, for example, asthma or heart disease or high blood pressure. You want to make sure to talk to your provider about the best way to protect yourself. And an additional note, for those over the age of 65, it's recommended to talk to your provider about a flu vaccine that can be more effective. For example, that holds an adjuvant or it might have a higher dose. This can solicit or elicit a better immune response, which might provide you better protection.
Okay, so new data also shows that common cold viruses are on the rise, and just anecdotally, I feel like a lot of people around me are getting sick, and in fact, they're at the highest level since 2022. So What explains this? Are we just being less careful than we were during the pandemic?
Not necessarily what we are doing, but what the environment shapes. This is a really complicated variable to try to predict. More than 30% of tests are coming back. It could be secondary to environmental changes such as the humidity or temperature. It could also be viral competition. Certain viruses outpace others. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that the flu season, the cold season has already started. So washing your hands as aggressively as possible, grabbing that mask when you're in crowded spaces, and of course talking to your provider about getting vaccinated are the best effective measures to protect yourself.
Okay, so you said we've all got to buckle up. ABC News medical correspondent Dr. Darian Sutton, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'm Selena Wang. The news never stops, and neither do we. We've got a lot more news right after the break.
I'm just going for Josh today.
Hi, I'm Selena Wang in for Diane Macedo, and let's get right to our top story. We are just hours away from a potential government shutdown. Lawmakers are at a stalemate ahead of a midnight deadline to pass a spending bill and keep the government running. Democrats are demanding $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts be restored and Obamacare subsidies extended to prevent insurance premiums from spiking for millions. But Republicans, they're budgeting. ABC O'Brien is in Capitol Hill with the latest.
Yes, Selena, as we hurtle toward that shutdown deadline, 12:01 on Wednesday, every moment getting closer. There's not much of a deal in sight here on Capitol Hill after that high-stakes meeting at the White House yesterday between President Trump and congressional leaders of both parties. Both sides seem further apart. Democrats say they're holding out for an extension of Obamacare tax credits, which are set to expire at the end of this year, and if they're not extended, would cause premiums for millions of Americans to skyrocket, and also potentially a rollback of cuts to Medicaid. They were in that signature legislation of the president's, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed some months back. The reality, though, here is there is an additional threat now from the White House, because if there is a government shutdown,
Deberías de aplicar ahí para meter como esos de la ciudad. Ahorita van a- Pues para eso lo compras, entonces no
layoffs of other federal employees during the shutdown that are deemed non-essentials, not people that would be furloughed, those who would just be laid off. The president saying today that number of federal employees that would be fired during a shutdown would be quote unquote a lot. That has concerned some Democrats afterwards. It has most of them from this position of saying that they are still going to hold out. They believe they have the political momentum to fight for these healthcare related issues. There is one Democrat who's joining with the bulk of Senate Republicans at this hour and would vote to extend government funding. That's Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. He says it's irresponsible for his party and any party that holds out for a government shutdown not to vote to keep government funding extended. Here's a little bit more of what he told me earlier.
I'm not really worried about the politics. It's just like this is our core responsibility. Republicans or Democrats, just keep our government open. If they did that in 2013, that was deeply wrong. And it's wrong anytime they shut the government down. I'd be very critical about it. So that's here we are. And if it's our party, that's why I refuse to do it.
But again, the vast number number of Democrats, Selena, is holding their ground at this hour, both sides far apart, as we head towards that shutdown deadline.
And that threat of mass firings, Jay, is what makes this potential shutdown so different than all the others. Thank you, Jay O'Brien. And a government shutdown would also have a major impact on things like litigation before the courts, economic reports, and more. Our correspondents have a look at what's at stake if lawmakers fail to make a deal before the deadline.
All eyes have been on this Justice Department in recent weeks. We've seen deployments of federal agents to cities like Chicago and Portland, where ICE facilities have been under attack. There's also been prosecutions and investigations launched into President Trump's political enemies at his urging, like former FBI Director James Comey, who was indicted last week. Now, there's questions as to how a government shutdown will impact this building. I'm told by officials here that they expect little in the way of impacts on things like criminal prosecutions. Those are considered accepted activities during a government shutdown. The real impact that you'll see out of this building during a government shutdown will be in civil litigation, things like the Office of the Pardon Attorney. There's also questions as to immigration enforcement. A previous Senate report found that 55,000 immigration cases had to be, or immigration hearings had to be canceled during the 2018 and 2019 shutdown. But there's a workaround effort going on here at the Justice Department. I'm told that based on President Trump's declaration of a national emergency, the Justice Department expects that all of its ongoing immigration litigation will remain ongoing in the event of a government shutdown. So they're really trying to see, at least in the near term, not a real big impact on the activities of this building in terms of prosecutions, immigration cases, and those deployments of federal agents that we've seen around the country.
And if we do see a shutdown and you are traveling by air, you likely won't see any impacts in the early days of a government shutdown. But the longer that it goes on, you will likely see more people calling in sick, both TSA officers and air traffic controllers. What we saw during the 2019 shutdown was after the first paycheck was missed, TSA employees who are required to show up for work to the security screening checkpoints began calling in sick in more frequent numbers. That led to longer lines at checkpoints all across the country. In one case in Miami, they actually had the security screening checkpoints began calling in sick in 2019. The longer that it goes on, you will likely, and you are traveling by
Of this building in terms of prosecutions and event of the base. Based on President Trump's declaration of a national emergency, the Justice Department expects that all of its ongoing immigration litigation will remain ongoing in the event of a government shutdown. So they're really trying to see, at least in the near term, not a real big impact on the activities of this building in terms of prosecutions, immigration cases, and those deployments of federal agents that we've seen around the country.
And if we do see a shutdown and you are traveling by air, you likely won't see any impacts in the early days of a government shutdown. But the longer that it goes on, you will likely see more people calling in sick, both TSA officers and air traffic controllers. What we saw during the 2019 shutdown was after the first paycheck was missed, TSA employees who are required to show up for work to the security screening checkpoints began calling in sick in more frequent numbers. That led to longer lines at checkpoints all across the country. In one case in Miami, they actually had to shut an entire terminal down and reroute passengers through other checkpoints. When it comes to air traffic controllers, there's 13,000 of them, and they will also be required to come to work but won't be paid. And again, during those first couple of weeks, things may be okay, but they are already short-staffed. So once air traffic controllers begin to call in sick because they either can't find childcare, they can't pay for childcare, or maybe they're finding other jobs to earn extra cash, we will see impacts. They are short-staffed, especially in places like New York City. And in 2019, air traffic controllers began calling out sick in New York City, and that led to some significant flight disruptions. And that is what some say ended that 35-day shutdown. So again, the big headline is here. You won't see very many impacts during the early days. As things go on longer, if they do, you can see longer lines at checkpoints and possibly delays or cancellations of certain flights.
Sam Sweeney and Alex Mallon, thank you both. And joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Texas. Congresswoman Johnson, thank you so much for joining us. So I just spoke with Congressman Mike Herodopoulos of Florida in our last hour, and he said the questions about health care subsidies expiring are fair, but there's time to discuss them. So why shouldn't Democrats just pass a clean resolution and get another month or so to make a deal on those health care subsidies?
Well, his characteristics of the deadline for health care is just not accurate. The new notice letters for health care premiums go out tomorrow. The day is now. The time is now. And the Republicans have had months to deal with this issue, and they've completely failed. They keep kicking the can. And so their assurances that, they're going to deal with it this time are hollow and unfounded and untrustworthy. The reality of it is the Obamacare subsidies will go into renewal tomorrow. Everyone will get notice letters tomorrow indicating a massive increase in their health insurance premiums. And the American people just can't afford it. It's going to have a catastrophic impact on our health system.
And Congresswoman, I want to get your take on what Senate Majority Leader John Thune had to say on Sunday about this coming shutdown. Take a listen.
And what the Democrats have done here is take the federal government as a hostage, and for that matter, by extension, the American people, to try and get a whole laundry list of things that they want, the special interest groups on the far left are pushing them to accomplish, and using a 7-week funding resolution, which is designed to give us time to do the normal appropriations process. They are using this hostage to try and get all these other things done. It's a very straightforward argument in my mind. It's simple.
So Thune is accusing Democrats of taking the American economy hostage here. How would you respond to him?
You know, it's almost laughable. The Republicans are in charge. They control the Senate, the House, and the executive. They have all the tools and levers to get the budget process done through the appropriate time. They know the calendar. They have known this deadline is coming since January. We've all known this deadline is coming. And they also know that Democrats are absolutely 100% committed to ensure that Americans have health care in this country. And they put forth a budget that they knew we could never support. And so this is all on them. If they really wanted to get a budget done, they would have come to the table within the negotiating time frame, put a budget together that they knew Democrats could vote for. But they know we will not tolerate for Americans, millions of people in this country losing their health care starting in January, and when they just can't afford it. We have to stand up, and the time to fight is now.
We are now less than 12 hours away until the deadline, and as many as 4 million federal workers could go without a paycheck. I've also been speaking to WIC and those who receive those benefits, and they say they've got about a week or so before women and babies could start losing their benefits. Is this shutdown worth the risk here?
Well, this is all, again, on Republicans. They are in control, and this shutdown is on them. And, I think it's ridiculous that the Trump administration wants to weaponize our federal workforce, and they're willing to play chicken with our federal workforce, like who can blink first. It's just unacceptable politics. But their health care benefits should stay in place for at least 365 days. I can't imagine this being shut down that long. So their health care benefits of the federal workforce should not be an issue right now.
But Congresswoman, we are seeing both parties pointing the finger at each other. It seems like neither side is ready to blink. But at the same time, Democrats have struggled to sell their message to the American people, and Republicans are trying to pin the blame on your party. Are you concerned?
No, I don't think we're having a hard time selling our message. My office is ringing off the wall with people saying, protect our health care. My mama has cancer. My spouse has a kidney transplant. My child is on Medicaid. All the things that their families need for health care. And the reality of it is, if you are, let's say, a family making $85,000 a year, your health premiums starting tomorrow, let me add, you're going to notice that your health premium is going to go from about $7,000 to almost $22,000. That is unacceptable in this country. People cannot afford that. Our health systems are going to crumble, medical clinics are going to close, and it's going to be catastrophic. So Democrats are holding the line because our constituents are asking us to. They're demanding of it, and we are not going to back down.
And I wanted to ask you about your constituents. Are they drawing the connection between this healthcare fight and what that means for them? Because I was actually just in Wisconsin speaking to voters, and while several people expressed concerns about what's going to happen to Medicaid, to their health care, they weren't necessarily connecting that with the battle that is going on Capitol Hill.
Well, my folks are. I think we've been reaching really hard to communicate with our constituents. The calls that we're getting from our office are that encouragement, hold the line, fight for our health care. That is what people want. People are terrified that they're going to lose health benefits in this country. And like I said, people have ongoing health needs that they need to have tended to, and the ACA tax credits make it accessible. These benefit small employers, independent workers. These are folks who are the vast majority of employers in this country. Most people don't work for large companies, and they get their health insurance through these marketplaces. And so this is a benefit that the American people are demanding, and the Republicans are willing to just throw it away, and they're trying to blame Democrats because we are not accepting this bill that they are trying to cram down our throats, and they don't like that we're not stepping in line, but we're not doing it because the American people are demanding that we fight for their health care, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Texas, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is announcing new military standards. His speech this morning included an overhaul of the Defense Department, Inspector General, and Equal Opportunity Program, saying the military is done with DEI policies. Hegseth says any job that requires physical power will be met with high standards and gender-neutral physical standards. He says if you don't meet the male level of physical standards, it's time for a new position. Secretary Hegseth says we're not training warriors. We're training warriors, not defenders.
It's called peace through strength. And as history teaches us, the only people who actually deserve peace are those who are willing to wage war to defend it. That's why pacifism is so naive and dangerous. It ignores human nature and it ignores human history.
President Trump followed Hegseth's address, putting his full support behind his Secretary of War and the armed forces.
My message to you is very simple. I am with you, I support you, and as president, I have your backs 100%. You'll never see me even waver a little bit. That's the way it is. And that includes our great police officers and firemen and all of these people that are doing so well. Together over the next few years, we're going to make our military stronger, tougher, faster, fiercer, and more powerful than it has ever been before.
To break all of this down, let's bring in our ABC News White House correspondent Karen Travers, senior policy reporter Ann Flaherty, and retired Lieutenant General Doug Luke for more. So, Ann, we've heard some of this rhetoric before from Secretary Hegseth, but talk us through these new initiatives and what it means in practice.
So what we're seeing is that Secretary Hegseth is now putting this into practice. He has issued several of these policy memos. One of them says that he wants to revisit the definition of bullying and hazing. He says that some of this has been overly broad, that it's that's been used to push out people from leadership roles, and that he is giving the Defense Department, what he now calls the Department of War, 30 days to figure that out. He also wants to shorten the amount of time that can be spent on Inspector General reviews to look at credible evidence. He essentially wants them to close the cases sooner if they do not find immediate evidence. Now, I will point out that he is under IG investigation at this time for his handling of classified material. Several people will find that noteworthy. But really, this was a rally the troops speech. He says that we're entering a new era at the Department of War, that they are no longer going to be penalized for not being politically correct. So an interesting speech there, definitely one for the history books.
And General Liu, there was a lot of discussion, as I mentioned, about these male standards. Now, what would that mean for women in the military and for women considering enlisting?
Well, there was a bit of contradictory policy there. He said at one point gender neutral, and then on another occasion he said male-based standards. And of course, it's a big difference. And I think it undercuts and provides too little respect and appreciation for the contribution of female men, female women in the armed forces. They provide expertise and experience across a wide range of job specialties, and there are standards today with regard to physical fitness, and by and large, the people who are in those jobs meet those standards. So I don't think this is the crisis that the Secretary to physical expertise.
Getting hit.
He has like a live stream. Yeah,